Hi, and welcome or welcome back to the Future of SaaS Festival. We hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. Just a quick reminder, if you're not already a member of our Slack community, follow the link at the top of the event website to network and join the discussion.
All right. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be moderating this panel today about everything customer journey. We'll do a quick introduction of the panel. So I'll start with myself. My name is Stuti Bhargav. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Immersive Labs. So Immersive Labs is a platform that allows you to upskill your workforce with hands-on training as well as gamification, and just kind of makes the whole cybersecurity aspect of things fun. I am dialing in from Boston, Massachusetts. It's a surprisingly sunny and beautiful day here today, so very excited about that. And a quick fun fact about me is I joined Immersive a little over a year ago, and my first day at Immersive was also the first day of lockdown. So I have not seen the majority of my company or met the majority of my company or my team. So that's been very, very interesting. I will hand it off to Matt from here.
Nice one. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm a CSM at Intercom. Intercom, for those who aren't familiar with Intercom, is a B2B SaaS product for, on the face of it, kind of customer support, but it's all about kind of customer relationships, customer engagement, all that good stuff. I've been with Intercom for 2 years. Before that, I was a salesperson with SAP, and then I was a customer of Intercom in a startup here in Dublin called Bazimply. So yeah, Colin here from Ireland, Costa del Dublin. A fun fact about myself is when I'm not doing CSM and being involved in the tech world, I am a musician. I'm an artist. So outside of this, I'm one half of Irish hip hop duo Tabby Rex. So if anyone's into hip hop music, hit me up and we can chat about that as well.
That's awesome. All right, Francesca, would you like to go next?
Yes, please. Thanks, Stuti. Hi. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here today as part of the panel. I have worked in SaaS and customer success for over 10 years, many years, and also in executive management as part of that. And recently, I've gone into the consulting route and advising companies on topics such as customer journeys and transforming companies. So really excited. I'm dialing in or videoing in from Hamburg in the north of Germany. And fun fact, I will share that with you once you connect with me on LinkedIn.
Swati.
Hey everyone, this is Swati. I head the customer success at McAfee for US, Canada. I'm a senior director there. In addition to that, I've worked with all kinds of cybersecurity companies throughout my career, like Cisco, SonicWall. I'm a Wharton MBA, and I'm an advisor in a couple of companies. I also invest in startups. I'm dialing in from Bay Area, California, and a fun fact about me is I'm adrenaline junkie, so I love skydiving, all sorts of bungee jumping, the sports you talk about. I love those. I think that's about me.
Awesome. Well, we have a fabulous panel today, so let's just get started. So when you think about the customer journey, I think the first thing that comes to everybody's mind and where most people focus on is onboarding, right? It's very important, and we're going to drill into that a little later. But I like to open up with asking the panel, where do the gaps come from? Where do the gaps come from in the customer journey? And what have you seen the biggest gaps to be? Matt, would you like to kick it off?
For sure, yeah. So I think the biggest gaps in the customer journey are we have those main kind of milestones in the customer journey that everyone keeps track of. It's onboarding, it's cross-selling, it's upselling, it's these check-in points as well. And then but what happens in between onboarding, check-ins, upselling, cross-selling, and then eventually that possibility of churn as well. And those are where the kind of gaps lie. How do we maintain a really good conversation with customers? How do we maintain a really good narrative with our customers where they're fully in the loop, they're aware of where your product's going, your direction, and where your team is going as well? Because we all know that when it gets to churn stages, half the time with churn, it's over an issue that you probably could have solved if you were ahead of it, or if you were proactive, or it's a feature that the customers didn't know you had and they went with someone else because they wanted that feature, but that gap wasn't there for you guys at all in the first place. So I think those are the major gaps that we have to face day to day in customer success, and trying to fill them in is definitely the biggest challenge.
Francesca, I agree with everything Matt said. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think when we're looking at sort of where gaps come from, I think a lot of the times, if we look at it on a high level, it's a mindset thing as well, right? So if you have a company that's kind of very siloed, in that thinking, it's kind of each department for themselves, then they start arising. And then I think you have the biggest impact from that too. So from what I've seen also, especially when you go from startup to scale up, that kind of phase, right? At the beginning, everyone does everything and you try to kind of just become many people at once, and later you have to pull it apart and create different roles and responsibilities again. And that's when, if you don't do that step or you don't do it in the best way, then you can have some gaps appearing there, especially as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Ati, since you have actually managed quite like large organizations like McAfee and everything, where scale actually becomes, comes into play. Would you like to address that question from a scale perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So customer journey is one of my favorite topics. I keep on talking about that. And yes, as Francesca said, right, with the scale, there are different kind of challenges that you start facing, because initially a single person probably be doing multiple roles. But when you start scaling as a company, you have to differentiate and you have to diversify. For instance, from my experience, when I've also worked in startup, I've worked in all scales of companies, larger scales like Cisco. So in a startup world, when I actually started out everything from scratch for their customer success, for their support, for their professional services. And I had similar people who were, helping out in each and every function. But as I grew the team and as we scaled the team, we had to specify these are our customer success managers, and this is the growth path that they're going to follow, because after some time, it was becoming more and more difficult. And I definitely think onboarding is, as Matt said, onboarding is the stage where you would see maximum of gaps, right? And if your onboarding is not right, then you're setting up your customer for a failure. That's the first touch point with the customer. That's the time when you tell them, this is the relationship we are going to follow. And if the onboarding is messed up, then the entire relationship and the entire journey gets impacted in that way. So as you scale, you have to clearly define what each and every function and each and every role has to do. You have to clearly define what are the KPIs for your CSMs, what are the deliverables that you want to see. And those KPIs need to relate very, very closely with each and every phase of customer journey. For example, if it's onboarding, are we doing the onboarding in first 90 days or first 30 days? Are we doing a survey after the onboarding to see what was the onboarding experience? So you have to do the measurements after each and every stage as well.
Yeah, I concur with that. Speaking of duration, right? Like, so onboarding, we all understand it. I mean, it's been proven that first 90 days of a customer's journey with any product is actually where they decide whether they're going to stay or not. So my question to you is it 90 days? How do you mentioned KPIs? How do you measure when is that transition from they're done with onboarding, they're moving on to the next stage? What are some of the things that you guys have seen work, not worked?
I think what's really crucial in the onboarding phase is actually the communication part, right? And having that clarity. So if you have, let's say, sales obviously is there at the beginning. They hand off to customer success, to the implementation team, potentially professional services if you need additional services. Does everyone know what their part is, right? Because you're all involved in making sure the client's happy. Who jumps in at what situation? So the way I've handled it before is obviously making sure that customer success especially is in kind of very early on, right? They're visible, they're there for the client, but the client also knows that their main point of contact is, for example, the implementation manager, the onboarding manager. If you have such a large company and you have all these roles, that they know who to go to for what. And we actually made it very clear. I mean, literally in the first meeting, handover from sales to success, everyone's in there, their leadership, ours, whoever needs to be in there. It's very clear. Dear customer, this is the person taking care of you. And if there's anything else, if you need to escalate something, if you're unhappy with something, things change, please contact your success manager. I think it was just really important to make it clear who to go to for what, because I've had situations where it was unclear and then they call implementation, sales, and success and everyone else. So I think that's where I've seen a lot of things go wrong in the onboarding phase. Yeah.
Swati, you were going to say something?
Yeah, about the duration, yes. But I would say it varies from company to company. It varies based on the size and scale of your operations, and it also varies based on your customers. It varies based upon the complexity of your solution. What I've generally seen is it ranges. So if we are looking at metrics for onboarding itself, I've seen it ranging from 15 days to 90 days. So a startup world, you would want to onboard your customer in the first 15 days, but when you are in a larger organization, you have to align a lot of resources. You need to do an extensive internal onboarding call with your sales team to understand what are the goals of the customer, what are the business outcomes for which they purchase the product. And then you need to do an external onboarding call with the customer within those first 30 to 90 days. I would say 90 days is a little bit too far off. First 30 days is what companies strive for, because if you have gone to first 90 days, that means that you've already, wasted a quarter with the customer. So first 30 days is what I generally see in most of the companies. So 15 to 30 days, and you need to have that internal and external onboarding touch point. And definitely in the external onboarding touchpoint, when you're doing it with the customers, you need to understand what are the operational goals that they want to achieve with your product and solution. What are their business outcomes that they are trying to achieve? What are the goals? What is the final, due north for them? And how does your team and your product help them? And then you also have certain metrics that you can measure on every stage of the customer journey. For instance, if you go to adoption and consumption after you have done the onboarding, then you can always look at, are they on N or N-1 release? Are all the licenses, or probably 90-95% of licenses are using? Is there any shelfware with the customer or not? If you have given them education, are they consuming the education? Have they implemented the product in the manner that they wanted it to be implemented? So that's how you define the metrics for your adoption and consumption stage. So I would not go in all the metrics, but yes, every stage has their set of metrics, and that's the way where you can control the gap that would creep in, because that's the way to track.
Makes sense. So I'm going to, I think we all agree that like the initial phase is important, right? And I think that's an interesting aspect to look at as Swati, that even if your onboarding phase is 90 days, the first 15 or 30 days are actually super crucial. So let me pose it. One of the gaps that I know I faced quite a lot is we can put in the best processes, best intentions. What about customers who actually, buy a product but don't actually want to kick it off, or delay kicking it off for weeks, if not a couple of months? I think we've all faced that, especially when you're talking with big enterprise organizations. Matt, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on, not only are you seeing that as a gap, but there's not a lot you could do. It's not a process breakdown. It's not that. It's on the customer side. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a funny one because, obviously you want to get everyone up to speed, rolling really quickly, understanding strategies, understanding the product education side of things and where they want to go with the tool that they just bought, i.e., your business that they just bought from you. So it's always a super odd one when they don't want to kick off straight away. And I think that the main thing there is obviously we can't force anybody to do anything. People can do what they want with what they paid for, obviously, but really getting the understanding of why and what's the business value for them in not doing this right now and holding that point down the line, or they want to do this in 6 months' time, they want to do this in 3 months' time, or in 30 days' time. And then just having that understanding there, and if there is a business value for them and holding this off and waiting until 30 days, until 90 days to start kicking this off, then personally, I wouldn't argue with that. I'd say, okay, let's take a note of that. Let's put a pin in this and then start then. This is your value delivered to you. And I want to make sure that you guys get the most out of this as per your terms. Now, if it doesn't have a value attached to it, that's when I start getting a little bit worried and a little bit scared. And I don't really understand. I think that the powerful of a really, really good discovery into that value is where you'll get answers and where you'll find out why things are going a little bit awry in terms of delayed onboarding. So it is a little bit of a sticky situation, but ask as many questions as you can, find out as much as you can and get as much info. If it's a case where it's valuable to them to delay it, you kind of have to eat that a little bit and then go down the line with them and go through that process with them to be a really, really good trusted partner of theirs. And I think that's the bottom line when it comes to CSMs, is that you have to be the trusted partner and you have to be there for them on their terms. If the value isn't there in delaying it, show them that, give that information to them, get it to them quickly. And that's really the best you can do, because at the end of the day, we can't force anybody to do anything. All we can do is support people.
Fair enough. Anything anyone, Swati or Francesca, want to add to that?
I think totally what Matt was saying.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that absolutely that clear communication is really important, right? So really being clear to the client about what the implications are, if there are some, and I mean, apart from just delaying everything, but what that means to them and how, just to being really clear about that would be my point here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I just wanted to add on to Matt. I think I align with him. You can, there's a saying that I always believe in: you can take the horse to the lake, but you can't make them drink. A couple of things that you can definitely try in such scenarios, because there are times where you would not want a lot of shelfware as well, because at the time of the renewal that comes back and bites us, even though if the customer has delayed the onboarding or have delayed the implementation, they look at those first few months as something where they actually purchased the solution, but they did not utilize it. So that could come back and bite us at the time of renewal. So a good practice there that we generally follow is having that connection, not just at the level of execution, but also having a connection at the level of decision makers. So there are two ways where you need to have those connections. And probably if you as a CSM are not able to reach out, let's say the VP or the SVP in the customer organization who are the decision makers, then probably your supervisor needs to do that for you. Make that connection, make sure we are aligning with both the entities within your customer organization. So the decision maker knows that why are they delayed on the onboarding, because their execution team is delaying it, and it's not because your company is not able to provide that solution. So that everybody is aligned, and at the time of renewal, they know what were the reasons that the onboarding was delayed, or what were the reasons the implementation was delayed. So that is very, very important. And sometimes I've also seen when you make that connection, or your supervisor or your senior leader makes a connection at the senior leader level of your customer's company, that's when from the top down, they get the directive to move fast on the onboarding. And that's when you also reduce the time window that the execution team was actually looking for initially. So that does fast forward the onboarding for the customer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is important to raise the flag, and basically, like everything you guys said, you can't, at the end of the day, you can't force people. But it's important to raise a flag, both internally, because unfortunately, a delay in start does most likely will have dire consequences down the line, whether it's utilization of the licenses, whether it's, you forget about it after 3 months and you're like, wait, what did I buy, type of thing. But, and one thing I will mention is sometimes even just raising it externally, as Swati said, to the right people above, you might get visibility. For example, I'll give, when I first started, we had some big government agencies purchase us, and they had to, because of the coronavirus vaccine efforts and everything like that, the resources were redirected to a different place, and a lot of projects were on hold. But getting that clarity, making sure that the buyers understood that this is a reason for doing it, putting it on hold, and maybe even having a conversation to say, should we pause the contract, for example, just makes you feel like a trusted partner, and it actually builds that, rather than continue to ask them, hey, get on a call, when they're like, listen, we have other priorities to work on. So one question, going back to kind of a little bit of what Francesca said, which was, we kind of have to do it all, right? And we are the point of contact. It's important to establish that. But one of the questions that someone's asking is that the problem sometimes is then you kind of become that coordination person, or you become that program manager, and people see you as, they'll direct me to the person rather than you being the person who can answer the question. How are there any tips or anything you guys have heard about how to make CS team kind of be less about that go in between, and actually become that point of value, I guess?
I'd jump in here on this one and say that I think we faced this issue a lot over the last couple of years. I guess we're still like quite a young company, and we're really kind of getting in stone now when it comes to the CSM world and building out this function. But we had that issue, and trying to, I think, set expectations is probably the most important thing you could possibly do with the customer when it comes to letting them know what resources they have allocated to them as a CSM, because everyone sees CSMs differently. And as well as that, it doesn't help that every business creates CSMs differently as well. There's some CSMs are kind of pseudo relationship managers, some are not salespeople at all, some are just a trusted advisor. So it's kind of funny in that regard. I think the best thing to do is to just set the best expectations from the start. Obviously, have a good segmentation of your customers. If someone is in that high value segment of your customers, let them know that they might get 6 hours of onboarding over the next couple of months, and they might get rolling time of an hour a month after that. If they're in the smaller segment, you might say, actually, we only have 2 hours of onboarding for you, and you don't get rolling time with the CSM unless you're premium, and that kind of thing. And that then leads to really nice things like upselling to make people a more high value premium customer. And it also lets customers know that, okay, I'm at a stage where I get good onboarding with a CSM, but after that, we don't get to work directly with them, but we'll have these premium resources instead, like, good support, or the help center, or some pre-built resources that the CSM team has already built. So I think expectation setting is probably the most important part of avoiding there's nothing wrong with becoming the guy. And I think it's great for customers to have that person to go to for help. But when it's not valuable for your business, then it becomes tricky. You don't want to be spending time on things that aren't generating good value for you. So it's about setting those good expectations with the right customers.
Yeah, makes sense. I like to add one more thing over there, is that, I agree with it. Like there are different flavors, I would say, of CSMs, right? That their focus is on different areas. But I always encourage my team that 10% of your time needs to be getting deeper with the product. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you're never going to be that person who's going to sit there and troubleshoot and open up code and fix a person's problem. Like that's not the goal. There are people there to do that. But at the end of the day, the more familiar, the more hands-on a CSM is with the product, the more relevant they're going to be. And the relevance can be as simple as saying, hey, I see you're doing it this way. I think it's better to, it's even more proactive about it. So making sure that they understand that they have a certain amount of time allocated to be all about product, technical, however you want to call it. But as you said, Matt, setting the expectation that you're not going to suddenly become that support resource helps both ways. Helps the team, because I think everyone wants to do that, but also helps with the customer experience.
Exactly.
And that kind of takes us back to onboarding where we started, right? Because if you make it clear at the beginning, you're like, this is what success is at this company. Then later down the line, you don't have the problem, exactly what Matt was saying. You're kind of everything in success. And that's the problem later down the line.
All right, so let's move. So we've talked about onboarding. And as I said, that's probably the one area that everyone's familiar with. I want to move actually to the end of the customer journey. And I mean, in a way, customer journey is cyclical, so it's not really an end. But if you kind of, I think one of the areas which is most least discussed is the renewal journey, right? What we talk about the first 90 days or first X amount of days, what happens to the last 90 days? So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, have you guys even thought about that? What does that look like? And in different organizations, obviously, depending on what the roles and responsibilities are, I feel like CSMs tend to be like, not my responsibility, it's all on sales for the last 90 days, which I think actually creates a lot of gap. So I'd love to get thoughts from each of you. Swati, if you want to kick it off.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, renewal starts at the same time when you start the onboarding. And I'll tell you why, because you have to make sure that you are taking care of each and every stage, and you have to start tracking your customer's health as soon as you get a customer. And when you start tracking your customer's health, you have to see how's the engagement of the account, how is the consumption on the account, are we talking to the customer weekly, bi-weekly, are we talking to the right people on the customer side, have they implemented the solution, are they getting value out of the solution, is there a value realization? Once we have all those parameters defined, and we can, then we also need to input what is their propensity to renew when they come up for renewal, let's say 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year down the line. And you need to track it week over week, because that could change even 6 months before the renewal. So renewal is not something that you only care about during the last 3 months. You have to start caring about it as soon as you sign your contract, because the activities that you will do, the results, the outcomes that you would deliver starting from when you onboarded the customer, that will define the renewal of that customer. So you need to track it week over week. And that's what my CSMs generally do, is we look at all these parameters weekly, and then we define or we change the health ranging from red to yellow to green, depending upon what's the engagement, what's the consumption, what's the propensity to renew, what's the customer sentiment, how many bugs are they facing, and at the end of the day, what is our relationship with the customer? Are they giving us any references? Are they giving us any testimonials or not? All of that defines their health. So renewal begins for me as soon as you sign the contract.
Makes sense. Matt?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a massive pet peeve of mine as well, is that when it's renewal time and either the account manager or the CSM reaches out, 180 days beforehand or 90 days beforehand or 30 days before the renewal date is due. Our customers they're really intelligent people. I think we shouldn't be, it's very transparent when you are getting in touch towards the renewal date. And the customers know that. And I'd say a lot of people on this call today have probably been that customer where they've had an account manager reach out to them saying, hey, how are things going? I hope you're liking the product. And I think, it's very, very see-through that you're looking to get that renewal in, and that's not trust building, that's not relationship building, and it's not good relationship management. So I think just keeping that conversation going throughout the year, and I know that might be a big statement, it might be easier said than done, but I think the smallest of touch points can make a massive difference to a customer when they are, having that relationship with their relationship manager or with their CSM. So I just think keep the conversation going as much as possible. Invest in good tools that allow you to do that in a way that works with you and your time management in your business, and have these engagement pieces that are set up, whether it's, a mix between automation and personal touches. Just get it in there and keep the conversation going throughout the year.
Yeah.
I think for me, just to maybe add to that is obviously the success plan, something we all work with or have worked with. That's kind of, for me at least, that's synonymous with renewals, right? So making sure if my teams I've managed in the past, I've set them up and I go, listen, you need to know at any point what's going on, right? And if these goals change, the pain points change or become more painful, whatever happens there, you need to be aware of that. And then you need to sit down with the client. And that's, of course, we have that 30, 60, 90 and everything else. But of course, you're speaking to your client on a weekly basis, especially if we're talking enterprise, right? High touch, you are in touch with them. So you should know what's going on and what kind of effect changes at their end might be having too, right? So looking ahead, not just what you're planning and what's on your sheet and your success plan, but you're always tying that back. Is this actually still what we're going for as a goal? Is this the percentage uplift that we're looking for? Has that changed? So I think that's how I marry the two together. I think that's kind of the key one. And then generally speaking, sort of having that 360-degree understanding of your client, right? If you have it, then you should be prepared for the renewal or any challenges that come up. It shouldn't be a surprise. I think that's how I've always measured my teams. I mean, not on the hard facts, but if we look at the soft bits, do you actually know what's going on with your client at any given point, in time? And not just your conversations with them, but also other touch points within the organization. Who's talking to your client and what's going on there? Is it positive or not? That kind of thing.
So everything you guys have said makes sense. And however, I'm going to challenge you guys a bit on this, is that it works for high touch customers, right? Everything you're talking about, the engagement, the level of understanding of the 360 and everything. But one of the questions is, how do you do that at scale, right? I mean, you're not, in reality, no matter how liberal you are with the ratios and everything like that, nobody I have not experienced where a CSM is having 100% touch points with 100% of their customers in their book of business, right? So even if you forget like the super high touch, and I'm not talking about the completely low touch who auto renewals might be just the right things for them, but there is that middle ground. How do you do this at scale, and how do you achieve that same level of engagement?
I'd love to jump in on this one again. Sorry, is that this is exactly kind of my role in Intercom, is that we had this kind of funky issue where we had so many kind of long tail or smaller sized customers that had relationship managers that were paying for the premium plan, but are considered, the part of our small business as opposed to the mid-market and enterprise. And we couldn't find a way to allocate CSM time appropriately. And we were seeing massive amounts of churn there over the last year. So, and the way we kind of tackled that in Intercom was I put my hand up. I'm a big content guy. I love creating, whether it's Loom videos, whether it's, newsletters or product updates and that kind of stuff, and just very short video walkthroughs and that kind of thing. And I said I would take on the SB space and I would work with all the SB relationship managers and do that with their customers. So, there's a couple thousand customers in there. It can be very, very tricky to get out to all of them. But the way we've done it is, segment it out, get your SB space, find the ones who are still in that very, very high level, number one tier. They will get one-to-one communications from you. I'm very lucky that I have Intercom as a tool to use and that I can reach out to them at scale and they can write back to me and start a conversation if they're in that, that high level zone. I've then got the mid and lower level zones, which I then treat a little bit differently. And that might be, maybe not allowing them to start a two-way conversation just because it's just a vast number of them, but they'll still receive, good videos from me. They know who their CSM is. They kind of recognize my face from these videos and these messages, and they see all the product updates, the new roadmaps. They're very much kept in the loop about what's happening inside Intercom. And the only fallout of that happens in terms of, getting volume back from them is they might reach out to support and say, hey, my CSM is Matt. Can I reach out to him? And they kind of have to go through that to reach me, which obviously can be a little bit sticky if they are on the very, very small end of things. But it's fine because it only happens once in a while. And it's not like every single small business customer is reaching out to their CSM. So it works quite well in that regard. And I really, really advocate for going for that scalable approach with your SB customers and splitting it up into who gets one-on-one time and who gets these nice little bite-sized bits of content that are still fully kept up to speed with all of your new training resources, all of your new product updates, releases, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll definitely really, really advocate for getting someone in charge of building really good content and getting it out there to your customers.
So I think,
yeah, Matt has actually covered everything for me. I completely agree. So there are ways, right? If you have really high touch customers, yes, you can have 1:5 ratio, 1:7 ratio, and your CSMs can do the justice to them. But as you go down on your revenue pipeline and you have smaller and smaller customers and they are the long tail of customers and they're not bringing that much of revenue, you have to drive to other avenues, which will be recorded videos, which would be webinars, which would be training sessions for them, which would be releases for them. Webinars is something that we depend upon a lot, because those customers, we collect what are the common grounds where they are struggling, and we start doing the webinars on those grounds, and they get the opportunity to ask questions, to have someone live to answer those questions for them. So emails, release, products, all of those things then come handy for those set of customers. And then obviously you have the automated tools which send out the automated surveys, or which also send out automated checkpoints to them at the different points of their journey. Those are the things that you can definitely leverage when you are talking about long tail of customers and you don't have the budget to assign a CSM to all those customers.
Makes sense. So actually on this, kind of taking this topic on scale, and one of the questions is around like, okay, so I know you mentioned different forms of, I guess, media, but then how do you email it? How do you do that, right? I mean, if someone is not in the product, emails are probably, I'm very honest with everybody saying email is the least effective mode of communication for me. What are other innovative tools to kind of get those unengaged customers or users back into the platform?
This is going to sound like a planned question because I use Intercom for this exact thing. but there are lots of other tools. I'm not trying to advertise Intercom or anything like that. But if you can find yourself a really good behavioral-based messaging tool, that will do wonders for you. So just in terms of what I do, I guess day to day would be, we're tracking lots of events and data points inside Intercom about my customers that I can filter my segments and find out what a not very well onboarded customer is looking like, or what a well adopted customer might look like, or what a churn risk might look like as well, based on, are they using the product to the extent that they bought it with? Are they making drafts of stuff but not making actual things inside the tool? Are they using the tool as they kind of said they would, or they supposed they would, or what we kind of went through in the success plan? Or even when the smaller tail customers, you get a few red flags in how people are working inside your tool. And those behaviors, when they're tracked, you can then deliver messages at that exact point. And you can, pre-build this. It's kind of a build once for the future, and you can kind of let it fly for as long as you need until you need to update it with new product stuff. So anything from around, even if someone's payment cards are failing, automate a message to go at that stage and say, hey, these cards are expired. Do you want to speak with somebody, or et cetera, et cetera. And then you can start even building these behaviors and these timelines around those pieces of, we're halfway through the year, we're halfway through the contract, we're coming up for renewal, et cetera, and just having touch points every couple of weeks or every couple of months as necessary with these people, along with those behavioral based pieces as well. I would agree, not a big fan of email. So definitely go with all the channels you can have. I think in-app messaging is the way to do things right now. I think while someone's in the product and being an active user of the product, that's the time to message somebody. And then email is for those people who are no longer engaged at all. And they're the big red flags, is that they're no longer inside your product and they're not receiving in-app messages because they're not using it. And then if you can get emails to those people, that's golden. If those emails aren't delivering, then we're in big trouble. Then we need to start picking up the phone and calling people. But that's at the dire stages. So hopefully it doesn't get to that level.
Francesca,
would you like to one?
Oh, sorry.
I just add on one thing here, because one thing that definitely worked out well for us was doing a Magic Quadrant. I think everybody has seen Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So when you start doing that on your product and you start positioning your customers compared to their competitors on the quadrant, and you start sending that to the customers, that this is your position and probably they're on bottom left and their competitors are on top right, that's what catches their eye. So they will ignore all the emails, but when they see, oh, this is my position, it's like you're giving them their report card that you definitely failed. And when they see they are failing in that certain area with your product line and their customers are at a different area, and you have also given them recommendations, these are the ways that you can go to the top right, and this is the amount of time each and every activity takes, that's when you would see a response from them, and that's when you will see that they will start seeing value in the product and also in their CSM, and they'll start engaging them. That has definitely worked well for us. And it's not something that you have to do manually. It's something that can be built within your product, and your product team can have that conversation. Your engineering teams can have that conversation and build it in the product. So all the competitors are automatically aligned at some place in that magic quadrant. If the customer is at the bottom left, guess what? They will talk to you and they will try to move to the top right. Sorry, Francesca, over to you.
Yes, sorry. So in terms of looking at smaller companies, I think that's, it's right. We obviously have to keep them engaged, right? Or smaller, actually, any company, customer we have to keep them engaged. And there are many different methods. And you're right, sort of high touch is very different to low touch and lower level. I think what I've seen work quite well is kind of prompts within the platforms, right? So within, when customers are using the platform, maybe we point them to new things coming out, innovations, whatever we're doing that's new, or have you looked at this before? That can be quite useful. But what I also want to inverse that point as well. What we had before, one of the companies I worked at, we were kind of bleeding on the success side because we had the small customers making us work the most, right? So we were spending most of our time there, which is not what you want. I mean, some of them can grow and that's great, but you don't want that happening. And then I sort of implemented kind of looking at positive churn, as I would call it. So actually looking at, well, who's miserable, who's been miserable for a long time, are they actually a good fit for us, right? So that's just a side point. That's an exercise I went through with my team. It's kind of looking at the customers that we did have, and we did find a couple who were just the ones that were creating the most amount of work for no return, right? Because those are not the clients that are going to grow because they're mismatched. They possibly were from the beginning, but they came in. We tried to service them and make sure they're happy. But sometimes you have to kind of go through with a comb as well.
Agreed. Yeah, it's very challenging because I think we've heard a lot of different ways. I think someone asked about like notifications, right? And the problem, and actually I'd like to take the conversation there, is as soon as you start doing in-app. So there's two things. First of all, in-app only targets those people who are actually already on the platform, which might not be the target audience, right? If you want to go off on the folks that are not on the actual platform. And is email the only way? Unfortunately, I think yes, but I do think, Swati mentioned webinars, which I think is becoming much more webinars, podcasts, like different innovative ways to not just talk about, hey, you're not there, get back in, but be more industry experts, I think is a really good way to start thinking about that. But kind of going back to in product, right? I also feel like now that's becoming a space within companies which is getting cluttered because you have customer marketing in there, you have customer success in there, you have product in there, right? Trying to add a bunch of stuff. So, and my question to you guys is, in product is awesome. It's contextual, it's there. But at what point does it become annoying? What point do people just say, shut off all these notifications and they're missing out on important stuff? Or, I guess my question to ask you guys is, who owns that mini customer experience within the product?
Yeah, I'll say for me, it's probably a little bit different, I guess, because Intercom is, they've kind of given me the power to do this myself, and if we were a much, much bigger company, maybe that might be a different story, and it might be more difficult to run that because I'm allowed to, speak with the other people in the company, like marketing, like product education, like whoever else it might be that are also sending messages, and I can line up with them and just speak the same language and say, hey, I don't want to ever overload the customers with stuff I'm sending them. Firstly, is there anything that's crossing over? Because there's nothing worse than sending double information from two different sources, one from marketing, one from success. That's just annoying for the customer straight up. So just to know when they're sending that, what they're sending as well, making sure that I'm not doubling up on anything is essential. And then, to be honest, the only other thing I really do is to give the customers the option to kind of shut me off. And like, you can unsubscribe from me, even though people say in-app messages, they're in your garden, you can send them as many messages as you want. Which is true, and it's not like email where if someone has the right to unsubscribe from email. I still believe that people should be able to unsubscribe from your in-app messages too. And I allow people to kind of have a granular unsubscribe from me personally as a CSM, because I'm messaging everybody, because I think, it's so funny when you have customers not not every head of sales is the champion in that business. You know, there's some businesses where there might be a sales rep or a support rep that really runs your tool in their business. I know I ran Intercom in my startup when I was a customer of Intercom. So that's kind of why I do that. I message absolutely everybody, every single end user we have in my space will get a message from me. So I love giving them the option to say, no, I'm just here doing my day job, Matt. I don't need to hear from you every other time about the new features, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to shut you off, and that's fine. So I think giving customers that kind of power is nice, because when they have the option to not receive it, I think it comes across as a little bit less annoying too. So they can say, okay, this guy is giving me the option to get this content. It must be premium content, and I can decide if I want it or not. So I think that might be a good rule of thumb to have as well.
I think so. Maybe that's actually not going into the granular level, because I think, like what Matt was saying, that's only the starting point, right, of what you can look at and all the different steps you can go through. But I think maybe zooming out in general, right, in terms of like addressing gaps and looking at those, I think we can all agree that on a macro level, it's not just one team. All those gaps, right, that sort of start popping up, they don't lie in any one place. You kind of have to look at it holistically. That's what I'm talking about, the zooming out. Because what I've experienced, just one quick example, there was a company I joined because they were bleeding clients. They were losing big clients. They didn't know why. Turns out, one example, you think Starting Point Sales was incentivized not to keep the client, but to go after new business. But somehow they were also attached to the customers. So kind of managing them, but not really, because where's the incentive? But turns out that was part of a much bigger gap journey the client, because also their pain points weren't being addressed on the services side and so many other bits. So I think this is something we can probably all agree with, right? That gaps are really something you need to look at way away from like bird's eye view to then zoom in by team. But I think, just that point that it's really important to go macro first and then zoom in.
Yeah, I'll just add on one thing here that as Matt was mentioning, right, all those notifications, you should definitely give your customers an option, because after some time it starts becoming noise and it starts going to one specific folder which they never go to, which automatically archives all your notifications. One thing that definitely can change that trajectory is how personalized are those messages to your customers. Again, going back to that example of Magic Quadrant, if you are doing personalized messages and you are adding value with those messages, people would read them and they would follow them. But if we are sending those canned messages as notifications to all different customers, where sometimes they may not even be applicable to them, I think they will just start losing interest in reading those emails. So a lot of this lies not just with the CSMs, but also with your product team. So a CSM has to go back and take that feedback to the product team, that what kind of notifications they would want the customers to get based on what kind of deployments they have, what kind of configuration they have done, what kind of setup they have done. And product can definitely include into your overall solution that AI-based mechanism where a personalized notification can go to different customers. And that helps to make that difference, because customers start seeing this is just applicable to me and it's not a canned email that is sent to like tens and thousands of customers. And that's easier to do only when you are using AI and ML in your product and you are working with your product managers, because it has to be automated. You cannot do it manually at scale for long-tail customers. Yeah, that's what I would want to add on to what all Matt and Francesca has already shared.
I'm just going to say there's in my experience, when you have multiple people owning something, that means nobody owns it. And so to touch on everyone's point, like even if you're looking at it macro, who owns that, right? And you're absolutely right. Like the execution might be different teams, right? So product might do product enablement stuff or new releases and stuff like that. But my suggestion would be have a single owner. In most cases, unless a company has like a user experience or a customer experience team, that might be a good person to own that. But that's not something I've seen very common. In which case, I would be advocating for CS to own it, just because they have the most holistic view of a customer. Now that by owning, I don't mean executing, but at least coordinating and giving that that viewpoint and that relevance that Swati talked about. But I think what mostly happens is everyone owns their little piece, and hence the kind of what the customer experiences then is a barrage of different items, which might all be relevant, but are coming at the same time, and it can get overwhelming. So we're coming to about like 10 more minutes mark. I want to focus a little bit on the questions that are coming in and just, start to get a few final thoughts from you guys. But so one of the questions, which is very interesting, is has there been any change in customer engagement, whether in-app or otherwise, due to the pandemic, like with most people being remote or working from home, and in some cases probably weirdly more overloaded than they were when they went into the office. Have you guys seen a change in engagement or behavior?
I can take that. So, the biggest change that I've seen with my team is we used to do a lot of on-site, and now everything has moved to online. We no longer go on-site, meet with the customers, deliver our QBRs face-to-face, build those relationships. So relationship building has become very different than what it used to be, because you would go on site, you would meet the customer, you go and have happy hours with the customers. You make those informal relationships that go a long, long way in your journey of customers. But now everything has moved to online with the pandemic. So you don't get to build those informal bonds. You get to build the formal relationships for sure. And it at the end of the day, it depends on the CSM and how street smart they are, because some of them can still build those informal bonds by continuously texting the customers, working with the customer, telling them this is the new thing. And some would just stick to their meetings and just stick to their weekly cadences. So the dynamic has completely changed, I would say, and it is more harder to build those relationships at that level where customer trusts you 100% with the pandemic coming in. I think I definitely have seen that shift with not having that face time with the customers.
Yeah, I would say as well, over the last year, I mean, we're in the B2B space, so a lot of customers are just stressed, in terms of engagement and how they engage with us. It's a lot more, it can be a bit more frantic at times. I think it's better now than it was 12 months ago, but I think you need to have a good level of empathy for your customers too sometimes. I mean, we sell a customer relationship platform really, kind of, support sales and marketing. So their support team could be having a terribly grim time because of COVID, and then that then comes on to us as well. So I think, in terms of empathy and with the customer, that's really vitally important now, because you gotta see people for their industry that they're in sometimes and say, wow, that's a very tricky situation. So it kind of throws things a little bit out of whack in terms of prioritizing customers by maybe their value or their spend or what they're doing on their product. Sometimes the smaller guy who's in an industry that's being really badly impacted by COVID might need a hand a little bit more, and I know that hand will definitely be more appreciated a few months down the line. So it's kind of like a judgment call these days, and it's a little bit of like a moral code at times. So I think that's definitely affected how we work with customers a little bit over the last 12 months.
Well, for me, obviously, I work with companies directly. So what I've seen, or the kind of pain I've seen them go through, is actually for their teams, right? So the frustration of over Zooming, we all know this. So having days filled with video calls and not actually getting to do your work, which then in turn has an impact on the customers. Right. So there's frustration there, and it kind of builds up, and kind of dissecting that and making sure the teams actually have a balance and that managers know how to deal with this new situation. That's been definitely one of the key talking points there.
Makes sense. Another gap, which as Sean brought up, which is actually very interesting, because every time we think of customer journey, we think of it on their side, right? But I think a very interesting gap, and probably much more common than we all would like to admit, is the CSM transition, right? Within our organization, whether we are shuffling between tiers or attrition or, change is inevitable, it happens, but that transition how does that impact customers, and how can we reduce that, I guess?
I think that
I can
go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I can take that because I just recently saw all of that. So yes, we saw churn, we saw a lot of handoffs because of the scaling that we are doing. And the best way to handle that is to have an internal platform. You can use Gainsight, you can use what is available externally, or you can build your own platform where all your customer data is available. Your CSMs need to make sure their customer data, their meetings, their QBRs, their feedback forms, their chats, their customer success plans, everything is uploaded on your database. That means that whenever they are transitioning the account, you do not lose the history of the account, and you do not lose the current success plans, the current contacts, the current meetings. Everything is available. Yes, the person changes, the person's knowledge of the account changes, but at least you have a good starting point to start with. I'm not saying that that removes all the disruptions that it causes when you hand off from one CSM to another. Obviously, customer enjoys a relationship with a certain CSM. They know the nuances, and everything cannot be documented, but you can document a lot of the details about the customer in that platform so that it's an easy switch. When a new CSM comes on board, the old CSM can do a warm handover. And if it's possible, if your churn is in a way where your CSMs are not going to your competitor and you still have a 2 weeks or a 3 weeks notice period, make sure you do a very slow transition. Or if you are scaling, make sure you are doing a transition over 2 to 3 weeks by the time your new CSM has all the data points, is comfortable, customer is comfortable with them, and then you switch off the old CSM from the account. So those are some of the things that help out to make it a seamless cycle and a seamless flow without impacting your customers too much.
Yeah, to absolutely agree with what Swati is saying. I think that having that, like I was putting in the text, that single source of truth, right? So really one place where everything lives and that you need. So many times I've had to help companies deal with the disparity. I mean, it's just all over the place, right? And you've got Salesforce, there's a bit of information, renewal data, things like that. You've got Gainsight, you've got Confluence, you've got folders, Excel sheets, living all over the place. And you kind of have to agree where all of that data lives and what's the critical data that especially customer success needs to see, right? And if you're working in partnership with sales, well, what's the visibility for both sides? Can you both see the same version of the data so that you can actually work together on it as well? I think that's really critical.
Yeah, and Sean, seeing your message on the chat, like, look, end of the day, losing a person does sever the relationship. That's just there, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about how do you reduce the impact on it. And I think there's a couple of things. For me, it's make sure that you are being honest, make sure you introduce someone new right away, and make sure that handover happens with someone who is already there. Like, for example, the sales rep or the account rep that they are already familiar with. Right. So the worst is, and this has unfortunately happened, is when, the sales rep is changing and the CSM is changing, and you're basically going into an account with a completely new team, which can be pretty, it's not the best scenario. Let's put it that way. The second I would say is prep. The more the CSM can be prepped, the new CSM can be prepped and understand the account and be knowledgeable about the account on an introduction call, the better the experience. So not just saying, hey, I'm your new person, tell me all about you. That's probably going to put them off the most because there's no continuity. But as Swati and Francesca talked about, right? If you have a tool or something that you have the information, you do the prep, you talk to the sales rep, you get history, and now your conversation is like, listen, I'm your new CSM. I understand these are your goals. This is where you are, and this is how we're going to continue. It just becomes a lot easier of a conversation. So now those would be my couple of suggestions. So we're coming to an end on this. Any last thoughts anybody has that they would like to share before we wrap this up?
I think
Go
the only-
macro level. I will keep repeating that
big.
because definitely go macro level. And the gap is never in one team or in between two teams. It's usually, because it affects many more. So always look at it zooming out. That would be my thought.
Yeah, I would say no matter what stage you're at in your business, just have a scalable option there as well for everything. Whether it's, having those really detailed, granular handover docs that are those sources of truth, have a bite-sized version of those for your smaller customers. That you can't do a plan for every single small customer. Have a 5 bullet points, like who's the champion, what's the positive business outcomes of them having your tool, what's the negative consequences if they didn't get your tool, what are the metrics they wanted to success, and just keeping those as those kind of key points to have when a new CSM comes in, or when that account eventually gets handed over. If a whole book goes up in the air and some new salesperson gets it, that's always good to check out.
Yeah, I would just add on, just map your customer journey, see what you want as your customer journey, see where the gaps could creep in, what are the metrics you want to define to keep track of those gaps. Don't try to solve the world hunger. Start with top 5 priorities probably, and I think you would be on a good path from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for a great session. And Gemma, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Diti, for moderating. It was a fantastic session. And thank you to all of the panelists as well. Obviously, with the amount of comments and questions from the attendees, it was really useful for everyone. So thanks very much for taking part.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.